We are starting to see some great games come back to the Mac, but this is one of the coolest I've ever seen. This game is going to ship early next year from Bungie, and this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it. And so I'm very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see for the first time Halo. Welcome.
2001's Halo Combat Evolved was a landmark title in console gaming. What started out as a PC RTS had, in little over a year, transformed into a flagship first-person shooter for the original Xbox. A story-driven FPS with a tense building mystery, interesting weapon sandbox, and, thanks to Xbox Live and LAN play, a revolutionary multiplayer component. Bungie was catapulted to mass acclaim with Halo, and the world waited with bated breath to see how they'd follow up Master Chief's debut. And in 2004, Bungie would release a title that would change the landscape of gaming forever. Hi everyone, my name's Bromo, and today I'd like to talk about Halo 2. If you haven't seen it already, I have a fairly exhaustive video on Combat Evolved on my channel, so if you haven't checked that out yet, I'd recommend doing so first, especially since a good portion of this video will be looking at how the Anniversary remaster of 2 compares to Combat Evolved Anniversary, so it will provide some much needed context. There won't be much discussion of Halo 2 Anniversary's qualities as a remaster here, so don't expect any analysis of level geometry changes. I simply just don't have the brain capacity to go back in and catalogue that sort of thing. Today's video is, similarly to the first, going to be one part commentary, one part analysis, and a smidge of whining here and there, as God intended. Let's begin. Halo 2 begins with a cutscene showing two perspectives. The Master Chief, hero of the first game and player avatar, returns to the solar system triumphant and is forced, to his chagrin, to endure a small parade in his and Johnson's honour. But at the same time, we see Thel 'Vadam, supreme commander of the Covenant fleet we fought and beat during Combat Evolved, as he is likewise paraded before his people, but in shame at his defeat, guarded by hitherto unseen Covenant creatures called brutes. While Chief Johnson, who somehow survived not only capture at the hands of the Flood, but also the detonation of the Pillar of Autumn's fusion drives, and the daughter of Captain Keyes, Miranda, are lauded and awarded, though as I was streaming at the time, my lack of verbal filter ruined the moment somewhat.
I also punched him like right ahead. Like clean through. It was just all wet. And then I put his brain chips in my brain.
We see Vadam stripped of his armor and branded both literally with a hot pokey thing and verbally as a heretic. We learned in the Truth and Reconciliation mission last game that the Covenant are a religious bunch, but in this split perspective cutscene we get a big peek behind the purple space curtain. The Covenant aren't just believers in a certain religion. Their whole organization, as a collective of multiple alien races, is held together by one central faith. They are in name led by a council of members of the different races, but the Covenant's de facto leadership lies with the prophets of truth, mercy, and regret. These religious leaders whip the onlookers up into a frenzy at Vadam's failure to protect their sacred halo from the Master Chief, and he is paying dearly for it now. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for the UNSC either though, as a Covenant fleet emerges from slipspace right above this station Chief is currently on, part of a network of orbital defense arrays. Admiral Hood is surprised at the small size of this fleet, given that this is the homeworld of the Covenant's current enemy. But there's no time to postulate as boarding parties attack all three stations, and the Master Chief is put to work.
Yes, sir. I need a weapon. Right?
I said the thing.
We get started on Cairo Station and are introduced to two of the new weapons for the sequel, the battle rifle and the SMG. To my disappointment, the assault rifle does not make an appearance here, and the Magnum is reduced from absolute cannon and primary weapon to, well, it's just a pistol. Kinda stinks. We also get our first opportunity to dual wield. I'll save the updated sandbox talk for a bit later, but for now dual wielding is cool, useful, and has a fair bit of depth. Being able to duel any two appropriately sized weapons stokes a desire to find cool combos, but I settle for two SMGs for now. We get started with a very familiar setup. We're on a human spacecraft with tight corridors adjoining larger rooms, there's lots of grey angular structures, and the Covenant are boarding. We begin with elites and grunts, but this opens up a bit very soon. I hope hose down the first squad despite their ability to Danny Phantom their way through objects and immediately get turned around. After embarrassing myself live on Twitch, I double back and Cairo Station opens up a bit in contrast to the Pillar of Autumn. I do try to figure out how to do a classic BXR on a keyboard, but I'm largely unsuccessful, so press on. The battle rifle feels pretty satisfying. At the mid to long range it's intended for, the BR has good damage and a meaty, clunky firing sound and recoil. Another boarding party dealt with, and one of the Marines around me sees the Covenant fleeing one of the other stations, the Malta. Let's see how they're getting on. Oh. Moving forward, we are reintroduced to the different ranks that Covenant troops can have with the red armoured elite mages, who have a little more health than their blue minor equivalents and possess the coordination for an alien cheerleading team. Searching for a Covenant bomb, we witness the quartermaster from the tutorial be cancelled on Twitter for his racist votes.
Split lip.
And I am ambushed by an active camo elite. I realise here after getting into some more fights that we have left medkits in the past in favour of regenerating health. And one of my favourite things about revisiting older games, that are this influential at least, is getting to see an entire generation of shooters being built before your eyes. We make our way out into the void to deal with some troublesome jetpack elites and head towards that aforementioned Covenant bomb. Back inside we meet drones for the first time, a new Covenant race that I had forgotten showed up in this game. They're essentially grunt level enemies only equipped with plasma pistols, but they're given wings and will stick to walls while they harass you in large groups. They're okay, but they aren't the most engaging enemies to fight. Heading down a lift we find that Covenant bomb and have to deal with the squad guarding it, which is easily done with a grenade and some dual wielding. I say easily, but do almost get clarted by an energy sword elite here. With that, the first mission is over and we're treated to a frankly glorious cutscene of Chief full sending into the vacuum of space with the weird pickle bomb, intent on destroying the Covenant ship in front of him. The Chief is picked up by Miranda and Johnson, and we take the fight to Earth. Chief, Johnson and some Marines drop to the planet's surface and arrive in New Mombasa, where the Covenant forces have massed for their invasion of Earth. We're dropped into a dense, urban area, the civilians already evacuated, and have to eliminate the enemies present. Once they're dealt with, several other squads assault our position and we have to defend it from the high ground. This goes pretty well, up until I get one shot in melee by an elite major. I can't really figure out how he did it since he had no energy sword, but a quick reload and plasma rifle pickup sends him on his great journey. The next squad are accompanied by drones, which in small numbers present little threat, though I do run low on BR ammo for a bit here, which is a little worrying. What's more worrying though is the pair of hunters crashing through the nearby gate, and I lack my classic Magnum and sniper, so I'm forced to engage in the classic Matador routine with an SMG and grenades. Going through the gate, we meet our first sniper jackal, infamous in Halo circles for their high damage and absurd accuracy. The jackal's main trick is sneaky placement by the devs. Long sightlines and high up perches make them at times difficult to spot. I'm still playing on normal though, so they're not that much of an issue, especially with the BR or the jackal's own beam rifle. Combat thus far has been restricted to narrow alleyways and courtyards, so then we open up to a shoreline. Are given a warthog, and this part kind of reminds me of the silent cartographer from Halo 1. Pretty beach with emplaced Covenant, a hog with some Marines on board, and then, despite some nasty elite ramming one of my Marines and turning him into jam,
Oh, fuck!
we descend into the nearby tunnels. Within, we find more Covenant, but it's usually easier here to just drive past the bulk of them, but a mysterious blue laser crashes through a hole in the ceiling, a low, droning noise accompanying it. Spooky. We press on, moving past Covenant troop carriers and momentarily biffing the hog and exit the tunnels. Outside, a long bridge lies before us, and Johnson reinforces our attack with a Scorpion tank. The music pounds as we travel down the bridge, Covenant ghosts streaming towards us, but they're easily dealt with. Small squads in defensive positions scatter and rout before the might of our Scorpion. This set piece is cool, but I do think the tank is a little bit slow, and this makes this initial bridge run go on a bit long. The ghosts, phantoms, and wraiths are easily dispatched at range. At the other end of the bridge, two banshees arrive, but are easily dealt with the main cannon and the rocket launcher wielding Marines on board, and we're back in the tunnels. Forced to progress on foot, we get our first look at the shotgun's reappearance in the Anniversary Edition. It's quite underwhelming. The model is cool enough, and it still does good damage up close, but the recoil and the animation and the sound are really weak. It's kind of disappointing to see its fall from grace. Out of the tunnels and into an open, grassy space beneath some domed structure, sniper jackals and ghost-driving elites patrolling around. Below us, a brand new Warthog equipped with a railgun piloted by some Marines engages the enemy, and we quickly deal with the Covenant and commandeer it. We dismount the Gauss Hog and move inside the building ahead to rendezvous with more Marines, and are introduced properly to the Scarab, the walking Covenant behemoth that has been stalking us throughout the level. It blows up a friendly Scorpion with ease and just ignores us as it makes its way past. The Scarab is a really effective reveal. The short glimpses we get of it create a nice tension, and the full reveal doesn't disappoint. Neither does the realization that we're going to have to somehow kill it. Chief is led to a walkway above the Scarab, and armed with a shotgun and a sniper for some reason, we descend upon the crew below. On the top deck, several squads come up to meet us, including some dual-wielding elite mages, but all are swiftly grenaded or no-scoped, and the Scarab is downed. I really like this set piece. It's a satisfying payoff for the rest of the level. It's a quick bit of fun action that has a bit of challenge to it. With that, the Prophet of Regret is routed. Instead of retreating out the atmosphere, he begins a slip-space jump directly above the city. Keyes orders the Chief and Johnson back aboard her ship in amber clad, and we follow Regret. The jump seemingly destroys a large part of New Mombasa. We cut back to Thel Vadam, the elite who was branded a heretic at the start of the game for his failure to protect Halo. A brute named Tartarus brings him before the prophets of truth and mercy, and he is given a new charge: become the Arbiter. We learn that the Arbiter is a mantle given to many elites throughout Covenant history, a warrior forged in times of great crisis who is always killed in his most important missions. An elite has betrayed the prophets and is building a rebellion of heretics against the council. It is this Arbiter's mission to kill this heretic and end his revolution. The prophets are very clear that this is a suicide mission and that they fully expect Vadam to die. Still racked by shame for failing to protect the first Halo, he adopts the mantle and asks of the prophets what they would have their Arbiter do. Here we meet the Spec Ops commander, an elite leader who's just the coolest motherfucker. I love him. He chastises the Arbiter for his brand, but he's really just preaching to the choir. The Arbiter is dispatched to the ruins of Halo Installation 04, as that is where the heretic is broadcasting his message of revolution. A Forerunner facility is about to be hit by a storm, and this has covered our approach, meaning we can opt for stealth. The Loyalist forces with us engage active camouflage and encourage us to do the same, introducing the Arbiter's unique mechanic. It's very powerful but only lasts a short time, and attacking will instantly cancel it, so camo is best used as a way to position yourself for the best start to each engagement, either picking up a new weapon or getting close to any elites to begin the fight. This mission is also our first look at some new Covenant weapons, namely the Carbine and the Energy Sword. The Covenant Carbine is an oddity in the arsenal. It's a hit-scan, reloadable weapon that excels at medium range, whereas the ubiquitous Energy Sword puts the power of Halo 1 zealots in your hands, one-shotting most regular enemies and having insane Commando Pro lunge range, making it a very effective weapon. But limited ammo make it best served saving for the more troublesome enemies. Into a large hangar bay of some kind, I decide to try out the Halo 2 Needler, and I don't know what's different about it compared to Halo 1's version, but this thing fucks. Dual wielding them makes the Arbiter supremely powerful, easily triggering the Needler's trademark explosions and bringing low even the tougher elites that we face. Some more Forerunner arenas are ahead, quite reminiscent of Combat Evolved, but active camo just makes it that bit easier to get the optimal starting position and even disengage to heal up in some of the longer fights. Making our way through, we hop in a Banshee and get our first taste of both air-to-air and air-to-ground combat, my accidental disembarkation and death notwithstanding. The Banshee feels pretty good. Its maneuverability in its slower mode, speed with the boost, and the acrobatic aerial dodges you can perform make a nice package. The Banshee's responsive and powerful, but just weak enough for it to still feel like a fight, rather than a power trip. Don't get me wrong, it's not ace combat or anything, but it is good enough here. We accompany a Phantom as we take out multiple weapon emplacements, flying around the station and strafing with our main guns on the smaller targets, with a fuel rod bombing run being good for the bigger ones. With the last emplacement destroyed, we land and head inside the facility to confront the heretic. Arby and the elites enter a chamber, and the elite commander mentions a stench that he's smelled before. My blood ran cold. My balls shriveled into raisins as a tank inside holds flood infection forms. Further in, the heretics do battle with some combat forms. The heretic leader taunts us via hollow drone as the flood enter the room. The infection forms have a new trick. We can see them bobble over to corpses and resurrect them, which at first I was a bit mad about, but it does remedy the issue that the Flood had in Combat Evolved, where they would just get back up sometimes, and it means the infection forms aren't just a speed bump as they were before. Onto the galaxy's slowest elevator, we and some elites defend against periodic combat forms dropping from above, making use of the new Sentinel beam too. Reaching the bottom, the heretics and Flood do battle below us, and after dealing with the stragglers, it's back outside to find the heretic leader. He seals himself inside a shield, but the Arbiter has the grand idea to cut the cables, suspending the station, and scare him out. More Flood combat forms follow, one or two even having energy swords, but their AI isn't the hyper-aggressive monster it was in CE, and they actually do show some semblance of self-preservation here, so it's actually kind of easy to dodge them. We work around the arena, cutting 3 cables and fighting off any Flood that spawn, despite the sword's lunge throwing me to my death once or twice. The last cable is rent, and the station starts to fall. We fight our way back inside, noting that the combat forms still have quite a bit of health, and the carbine doesn't quite cut it damage-wise. The heretic flees to the sky in a Banshee, and we follow, even recreating the Master Chief's Banshee skills in Halo 1's last level, the Maw. Finally catching up with the heretic, he claims that the prophets are leading the Covenant to slaughter, even bringing 343 Guilty Spark into the conversation.
Is it true you done anal with her? Now, I poked her booty hole today when she was laying down. It's a proper, her bum hole was winking at me doing that. I was like, rah, you got a cheeky little bum hole, I can't lie, fam.
Of course, we already know this, but the Covenant are all unaware of Halo's true purpose. Despite Spark's ability to reveal the truth to the Arbiter, the heretic just double-crosses him anyway, and a boss fight follows. The heretic uses 2 holograms that do serious damage. Since they wield plasma rifles, the damage to your shields is considerable, and the only way to know you're shooting the right guy is to look for the shimmer of his energy shields. This fight is okay. All 3 just fly around, and active camo is necessary to disengage and recharge your shields, though it is easy to lose track of the real boss. He doesn't have that much health though, so after a few tries, he goes down pretty easy. Once again, Guilty Spark is about to spoil the plot of Halo 1, but Tartarus steals him away with his gravity hammer, and the mission is over. The Prophet of Regret has retreated to another Halo, and the Chief, along with In Amber Clad, have followed. Dropping down to the surface with the fucking awesome ODSTs, we fight through an overgrown jungle temple and have to defend it from phantom-bound reinforcements. I once again make use of the double needlers to some pretty good effect, and am gifted a warthog to progress through the jungle. We drive along a cliff that reminds me of the Truth and Reconciliation mission, and we get to see a huge lake with odd forerunner structures peeking out of the water and shining beams of light into the sky. After dealing with more Covenant with the very chatty ODSTs and lowering a bridge to progress, we're given a Scorpion to deal with the Wraiths on the other side. Ghosts and Banshees try to block our path, but our Shaiko peeked to death with the tank, and we progress through more temples. A remix of the Walk in the Woods song from CE plays here, and it's a really nice mix of an action soundtrack style percussion with the mystery and ambience of the original song. Further inside, the Scorpion takes a bit too much damage, and I'm forced to get back in the Hawk, which is honestly pretty liberating. The speed and snappiness of the Hawk's controls, coupled with the improved ally accuracy with the minigun, make a nice contrast to the tank. A Pelican drops off some weapons for us to resupply with as we continue on. More temple arenas hold Covenant to kill, including an elite duo that I tried to dual plasma pistol to death. It works, but I trade in a Covenant carbine instead once they're dealt with. Through a small cave and onto a waterfall, a sniper jackal is assassinated, and I use his beam rifle to clear out some of his mates.
Sniping's a good job, mate.
Several drone squads appear in force, and their evasive actions do momentarily get the better of me, but the sniper and carbine are more than enough for them, and the others closer to the exit. We come out of the small ravine into one of those forerunner structures we saw earlier in the lake and deal with the guards, even meeting the elite honor guard for the first time. Energy sword wielding enemies with lots of health that guard the prophets will one-shot your ass, but they are, as most living things tend to be, weak against being shot in the head with an anti-material rifle. We see a hologram of the Prophet of of regret, claiming that he's going to activate Delta Halo. Miranda and Johnson plan to go to the library to retrieve the index before Regret can, and my whole body shivered at the mere mention of it. For now, Chief's mission is to find Regret and end him. Before we do that, let's talk a little about the updated weapon sandbox for Halo 2. There isn't really that big of a shakeup with Halo 2's weapons, aside from one. The battle rifle is an extremely good weapon. It essentially fills the true primary role that Magnum held in CE. It's accurate, does solid damage at all ranges, and can one-burst unshielded enemies with a headshot. Now, I'm old enough to remember hearing people still bitching about the Halo 2 noob combo, where in multiplayer, this gun plus the plasma pistol was apparently an absolute terror. The SMG is the replacement for my beloved assault rifle, and despite my misgivings about its replacement in the first place, this thing is pretty good. In the hands of a Marine, it looks like an SMG, but wielded by the 7-foot mutant that is the Master Chief, it's more of a machine pistol. It shoots blisteringly fast, especially when dual wielding two of them, but it chews through ammo to compensate. The Magnum isn't the beast it once was, but it's not terrible. No zoom this time, but it is absurdly accurate and still does very good damage versus unshielded enemies. Despite Halo 2's use of long sightlines, it still has some place, but the problem is that pretty much wherever you find the Magnum, you can also get the BR. So if you're trying to be optimal, you'll just go for that. Dual wield does make things more interesting though. Pairing up the SMG and Magnum gives you two hit scan weapons that excel at their respective ranges without having to swap weapons to engage at different distances. The shotgun still does boingo damage and can still interrupt its reload to shoot any already loaded shells. It remains pretty much unchanged from Combat Evolved, but the energy sword kind of displaces it as a be-all and end-all close-range weapon. So while it's still very good and does have a bit more range than the sword, it's no longer the king. The sniper rifle is still the best long-range weapon in Halo. It's great damage, being able to one-shot almost everything with a headshot, coupled with no accuracy loss when hip firing, make it an awesome weapon, though it's still balanced by its general lack of ammo in most missions, so it's better off being saved for elites and the like. The rocket launcher is almost identical to its debut outing, but has gained a lock-on feature for vehicles, which is pretty neat. Its staggering power but low ammo make it similar to the sniper rifle, a weapon used best for more troublesome enemies rather than take-all-comers sort of thing. The plasma pistol no longer stuns enemies like in CE, but it's still capable of insta-downing shields with an overcharge and can be fired pretty much as fast as you can pull the trigger. As good as it was in Halo 1, it's even better here thanks to dual wielding. In fact, it's not very good at all on its own, but quickly gets supremely good when paired with an SMG or a Magnum. The plasma rifle comes in two flavors: Mountain Blast, which is the same as the original, though it too lacks its stun capabilities, and Blood Orange, which shoots faster but overheats faster too. I think it's down to preference, but I just couldn't get the Brute rifle to cooperate, so I stuck with the classic for most of my playthrough. The Covenant Carbine is the alien equivalent to the battle rifle. High damage, accurate, and good at mid to long range. The differences are mostly aesthetic, with them both being ballistic, magazine-fed weapons. I have to say that the Carbine's design and animations are very pleasing to the old lizard brain, especially that reload. The Beam Rifle, collected off of Sniper Jackals, is very similar to the UNSC Sniper, but its heat management is frankly whack. Whereas the element of skill with rapid firing the sniper adds depth and a nice intrinsic challenge, the Beam Rifle overheats if you shoot it more than twice within a second or two. The Energy Sword is, as previously mentioned, the king of close range. It does boingo damage, even more than the shotgun, but it has two modes. Pressing the normal melee key does a quick slash, suitable for a swish-swish death sort of approach, but you can press the fire button when the reticle turns red to send yourself like a cunt-seeking missile at whatever poor enemy you've locked onto. The Needler remains mostly unchanged from Halo 1, but for some reason, probably dual wield, I used it way more this time. Getting 7 shots on target with its slow projectiles can sometimes be a bit of a pain, but having that amount of time halved where you need to hold the trigger certainly helps getting those classic explosions. The Brute Shot, which we still won't see for some time, is okay. It's a projectile grenade launcher, but the grenades don't really do that much damage, and ammo for this thing is generally scarce, so it only saw a little bit of use in my playthrough. It's got a cool melee though. The Sentinel Beam is a bit strange. A beam-type weapon that puts out constant damage while the trigger is held. It requires decent tracking to be effective, and it is good against shields, but it overheats quite quickly, so I think its full potential is missed out on. The Fuel Rod Cannon isn't often seen in Halo 2, but its It's effectively your Covenant rocket launcher. Slow projectiles with big damage, rare ammo pickups, and no lock-on like the rocket launcher. It's more noticeable in the hands of enemies than the player, to be honest. So, the weapon sandbox then. You still have your 3 pillars of ballistic, energy, and grenades, but more so than the first game, many arenas in 2 seem to be designed explicitly around the battle rifle. Long sightlines were often present in Combat Evolved, but that was to give the player an observation phase to the combat loop. Enemies wouldn't detect you straight away, so you had a chance to analyze each Covenant squad composition, decide what weapon would be the most suitable, and which enemy to take out first. Here, enemies almost always spot you straight away, unless you have active camo, which is one of the reasons that the Arbiter's missions are so good. So you're forced to go straight from observation to execution, wherein the BR is always a safe choice and often the most optimal. Most optimal doesn't always mean most fun though, and if you disagree on that, I recommend you take a fucking shower and get out of my Rainbow Six Siege lobbies. There's a small sacrifice made in player expression. Often I'd have to discard my dual needlers or SMGs for something that could actually get the job done, limiting the freedom that the more open spaces and most of the arenas in Combat Evolved's first half provided. Another sacrifice is the weakness of some of the weapons in their respective roles. The plasma rifle, for instance, was already kind of in job limbo in Combat Evolved. The speed at which the plasma pistol could down shields and the accuracy of the magnum or high damage of the shotgun meant that the plasma rifle was almost always outclassed by something else. In Halo 2, it suffers the same fate while being even worse than in the first game, as shield stripping no longer stuns enemies, and dual wielding, while possible with the plasma rifle, can also be done with the plasma pistol, meaning it's even easier to combo that gun with something that does better flesh damage than the PR, like the SMG or the Magnum. There are a couple cases of that here. The carbine, as good as it is, fills the same role as the battle rifle, so the choice is either up to preference or ammo availability. So one of your 2 weapon slots will probably be filled by one of 2 guns that feel very similar to use, and the other slot then will likely be reserved for a close range weapon such as the shotgun, SMG or energy sword. This essentially nullifies the reason for a 2 weapon limit. You are at all times likely equipped for combat at all engagement distances, and interesting choices to make regarding how you're going to tackle one encounter or the other often just comes down to instinct instead of as a result of planning. These serve to make the game feel faster and more action focused. Reconnaissance is replaced by getting shot at by a sniper jackal, and the likelihood of being suited for the fight that the devs just dropped on you is high, which is good for the power fantasy. There's no being caught with your pants down facing a sniper with only the SMG, but it's bad for recapturing that holistic combat loop that the first game established. Now, I'm no Halo 1 fanatic. If you've seen my hour-long diatribe on that game, you'll know that I believe the devs created this finely honed combat sandbox only to take it out back and shoot it when the flood arrived. But I maintain that the first half of CE has some absolute bangers when it comes to combat encounter and environment design. One area that I believe Halo 2 excels at though is the arenas. The missions on Earth are essentially a series of corridors with very nice skyboxes, contrasting CE's collection of open areas with scattered cover. In the sequel, not only do these arenas feel just enough like they could be a real place, they also offer clusters of cover, nooks and crannies to retreat to and charge your shields, and for the most part, the path forward is obvious while feeling natural, rather than CE's tactic of either having the hand of God guide you with suspiciously well-lit doorways or downright bad conveyance. The disappearance of health packs add on to the other changes to create a sandbox that feels far more suited to all-out action. There were times in Combat Evolved that I'd be caught at a checkpoint with very little health and a shield that felt like its recharge was hamster-powered, and this meant that I'd have to approach combat far more carefully than perhaps the Master Chief should. In service to the power fantasy, this Mark 6 Mjolnir armor comes equipped with a shield that's more diesel-powered. After a short delay than before, it recharges almost immediately, your health doing the same. This means that after every engagement, you essentially go back to a neutral state. No hiding around corners or surveying the enemy positions, not that that's even possible in most of the fights in 2. Now you can charge straight in, and as I've just explained, you are almost certainly well suited to the upcoming battle with whatever weapons you currently have. The sandbox is slightly different for the Arbiter. UNSC weapons are rarer, but with the carbine being the most prevalent of Covenant weapons and very similar in function to the BR, it doesn't doesn't feel like it contrasts that much. Active camo changes things though. While it doesn't last very long, being able to conduct a small amount of recon on each fight before it begins, or being able to disengage when threatened is really cool, and it opens Arby's levels up a bit more, as all that observation that the chief can no longer do is passed to him. He also often already has an energy sword from the get-go, so while it still has the problem of being given an optimal loadout straight from the rip, it's cool enough that I don't care that much. Overall, I still enjoy Halo 2's combat. It's very successful as making you feel like the Master Chief in the books memes from a few years ago. My only real problem with it is preference. Halo 1 Sandbox, while marred by the Flood and the Magnum being good at everything, was my favourite thing about it. On an alien ring world or in an unmarked fucking warehouse, that combat system will always engage me. Whereas the sequel endeavours to embody the action hero Master Chief is supposed to be, and in my opinion, the game suffers a little for it. Back to Delta Halo and towards the Prophet of Regret. We have to fight through the drones and elites streaming into the temple complex and outside, where sniper jackals and other troops seek to block our path. After wrestling with the beam rifle's heat mechanic for a bit, we approach a gondola and 2 hunters drop down to finish us off. The beam rifle quickly sorts them out, despite my inability to save one of the friendly marines. We get our final Pelican resupply as the gondola draws in, and after clearing it we begin the slow journey across the lake, beset by drones, other gondolas on the opposite sides, and even banshees. Once we've crossed the lake and arrived in the central tower, we take a bathysphere down to Rapture in this very cool sequence, and Cortana intercepts a communication from Regret, apologising to the other hierarchs for his blunder of attacking Earth. We're now under the lake, in this awesome arena that's a mix of previous Forerunner architecture we've seen before, with big windows on all sides constantly reminding us of what's outside. The odd honor guard proved to be a small speed bump, even sneaking up on me with an energy sword once or twice, but we make our way through. Into another bathysphere, and through another Cortana intercept, we're back outside onto another gondola, and have to fight some banshees and jetpack elites too. As we're about to face Regret, an entire Covenant fleet exits slip space above us. It is enormous, apparently bigger than any other seen so far. Seeing all the ships as well as the floating city of High Charity gives me goosebumps in the same way that seeing Halo's Skybox did for the first time. Inside, as we get closer to the Prophet, we see that this arena is swarming with honor guard, but thankfully I still have my energy sword, so they're not that much of a problem. Dealing with Regret himself looks tricky. He has a shield on his big floaty chair and fires big blasts from it, but the honor guard still skulking around are a far more dangerous threat. Regret has a lot of shit to say. I think it's time we shut him. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be funny, but it did give me quite the chuckle, just fucking hammering him. Outside, the Covenant fleet begin to glass Delta Halo. Chief manages to outrun the blast, but is knocked out and falls into the water below. Luckily, a Baraki from the 2007 Creeps from the Deep Bionicle line saves him. We'll leave Chief to whatever the fuck that was, because for now we're back with the Arbiter, whose mission, now that he and the rest of the Covenant are on Delta Halo 2, is to acquire the index from the library before the UNSC can. My fight or flight response was starting to kick in. The Flood are obviously here, given the Baraki tentacle we just saw, so the initial combat arenas are fought solely against Sentinels. Into a large arena, we're met with an Enforcer, which serves as a sort of mini-boss. It has a big frontal shield which requires you to get around it to attack, but the slow speed of the Enforcer, large arena with multiple levels and active camo make this fight nothing but busy work really. We deactivate the shield around the library and travel to the other side of a snowy canyon, where the Flood are engaging with the Sentinels, including another Enforcer. The thing with this Enforcer is that he's so slow you can really just ignore him while dealing with the more threatening Flood. Deeper into the library, we fight through Flood forms and overhear chatter of UNSC forts meeting the grisly fate of Infection. Here, the full Flood repertoire is on display. Infection forms with their new resurrection trick, combat forms retaining their speed and melee but also gaining the new SMG with all its close quarters bite, and carrier forms who remain seemingly unchanged from last game. I die quite a few times here. Bungie have managed to make the exact same mistake as the previous library mission. Swarms of Flood attacking you in small arenas that just repeat and repeat. I will concede that their new AI isn't quite as aggressive, so if you play a little bit more carefully, they tend to slow down and will even sensibly prioritize fighting the Sentinel that spawn in too, so I don't get a heart rate warning from my smartwatch like I did last time. We get deeper and deeper into the complex, eventually coming back out into the canyon and linking up with the elite Spec Ops team from earlier. A short wave defense segment follows, combat forms jumping in and doing battle with the elites and you. The Spec Ops team's presence is a bit of a salve to the problems inherent in fighting the Flood, as they split aggro and actually contribute to the fight. This also lets you do the classic Halo target prioritization thing. If one combat form has a more dangerous weapon than another, ordinarily you have to just shoot whichever's closest, but here it gives you a bit of time to make those crucial decisions. Once the Flood are dealt with, the Spec Ops commander rejoins us and even drops off a new vehicle, the Covenant Spectre. It's pretty neat, essentially the equivalent to the Warthog with passenger seats and a turret on the back. The music fucking rocks here. You really feel like you're going down into hell and winning. The Flood are controlling both Covenant and human vehicles up here, so when my Spectre takes a bit too much damage, I trade it in for a Hog and move it on outside. More Flood and Enforcers are present, but mostly ignored as I tear past in the Warthog. I use the vehicle mounting system here for the first time since killing Regret, and it's honestly pretty cool. Bare hand slapping the cover off a Scorpion or Wraith and dropping a nade down the hatch never gets old. After a few more arenas, we get another Spectre, and the commander joins us on the turret. The Spectre, like the Ghost, has a slow hover mode and a boost, but the way the environment is designed here leads me to boosting off a ramp and straight into the floor multiple times, which gets a bit vexing. After all that fun, we get to a big gondola. My beloved Spec Ops commander stays behind to deal with the Flood following us. Tartarus calls him a coward, which is rude and wrong, and why I'm looking forward to pasting that fucking monkey. But we are reinforced with elites as our gondola moves forward. Flood forms run riot here. They kill all of my elite friends almost immediately, and their big health pools force me to over-rely on the energy sword. A lot of circle strafing follows, trying to lead combat forms around a corner and sword them, but they do the same thing to me with this shotgun multiple times, so this section takes a while. Back into the library and into an arena very reminiscent of Combat Evolved's worst level, but instead of that bullshit, we are mercifully treated to a cutscene. Keyes and Johnson grab the index, but RB intervenes and beats the absolute meat off of Johnson. Their epic duel is interrupted by Tartarus, who grabs Miranda and the index and betrays us, blasting the Arbiter down a hole and making off with the commander and the index. He tells the Arbiter that the prophets themselves are the ones who ordered not only his death, but the removal of all the elites from the Covenant before sending him to his doom. We now see that it wasn't in fact a bionicle that saved the Master Chief, but a big, horrible, gross Flood thing called the Gravemind. He has both RB and the Chief in his grasp and proceeds to freestyle rap at us.
Take a boss, you must choose. For one you shall keep, and one you shall lose. Showing off not only the puppeted corpse of the Prophet of Regret, but also the monitor of this Halo, 2401 Penitent Tangent, who both seem to be controlled in some way by the Gravemind.
Mandem, I had to go and dogs, yeah. Had to go and dogs, boom, 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 I was clarting it. And my ting slips out, innit? I tried to put it straight back in, no hands ting. So it slipped out, I thought, yeah, man's got the no hands ting. I tried putting it back in, and she's like this, boom! I said, oh shit, wrong hole, my bad.
Tangent calls Chief Reclaimer, like Guilty Spark did, saying now that he's here, the Halo can be fired. The two argue a bit, and Gravemind takes them away, but he then explains to the Arbiter that the great journey that the Covenant aspire to is a lie, that activating Halo will only kill all life in the galaxy, and Chief confirms what he says. Gravemind naturally would rather Delta Halo not fire, so he sends the two enemies on separate missions to find the key before that happens. Chief is teleported to High Charity, and the Arbiter elsewhere. elsewhere. We start with Master Chief, sent directly into a room with the remaining prophets and their new brute honor guard, and we see that they have the key, so we'll need to get that back. This is our introduction to fighting the brutes. Health pool wise, they're similar to elites and indeed fill the same role in enemy squads as leaders, but they lack shields, instead having physical armor that you can see ping off them as they take damage. Once they're about half health, they enter a berserking state where they drop their weapon and monkey charge straight at you, doing big melee damage if they reach you. After they're dead, we plug Cortana into High Charity's computers and move on. Once we're outside, we get to see High Charity's skybox, and it's magnificent. The city below is visible, streets and lights stretch out in a massive expanse under a central dome, and we can see some triangular structure in the middle, stretching up towards the central light. Down a grav lift, we learn from Cortana that the prophets are heading towards that pyramid, so we're charged with intercepting them. On the way, we find holding cells with marines inside and have to fight through a prison complex to reach them, going between 3 levels with grav lifts to progress. We get outside and see the same green glowy things from the original 343 Guilty Spark level, and I still don't know whether they're Flood in origin or not. Across a bridge, in amber clad, flies straight into High Charity, but doesn't respond when Cortana tries to hail them. The last 5 minutes essentially repeats itself here. A corridor into an arena, into an outdoor arena, and getting through that leads us to the mausoleum of the Arbiter that we saw at the start of the game. This would be neat, but there's a massive fight brewing here. The elites are fighting back as the brutes try to exterminate them. Cortana tells us to sit this one out, but I get a bit lost trying to find the way forward, so I have to fight like 6 hunters multiple times. Avoiding that gauntlet, the music starts fucking blaring, and Cortana reads Flood signatures coming from in amber clad, which is just terrific. Tartarus is bestowed with the honor of firing Halo and enacting the Great Journey, but he and the prophets are assailed by Flood infection forms, one even grabbing the Prophet of Mercy. Truth decides to let him die, convincing Tartarus to do the same, and they move on. The Arbiter has been sent just outside of Delta Halo's control room, and we hear sounds of combat as the elites are being purged by the brutes. The somber music that plays here really sets the tone, and we move forward to avenge our fallen brethren. Brutes, I've decided, have just a bit too much health. Even the regular brutes can sustain 2 energy sword hits, and that shit is cringe. Their lack of shields here also means, since we start off equipped with the plasma rifle, that they feel just a bit too tanky for my liking. Not all the elites have been killed though, and we are joined by more Sangheli as we move forward, even being reinforced by grunts and a zealot, which is quite cool. Further along, we hop in a ghost alongside some of our allies and rocket along the canyon we find ourselves in. 2 wraiths are encountered and destroyed before we move inside. My beloved Spec Ops commander has survived and rejoins us as we move to kill Tartarus and secure the index. In the meantime, Cortana and Chief discuss strategy. They decide that the best course of action is for Cortana to stay on High Charity and blow up in amber clad like she did with the Pillar of Autumn, while Chief goes after the Prophet of Truth, for which he'll need the triangle structure at the center of the city, which turns out to be a Forerunner ship that he can take to Earth to intercept Truth. He's clearly bothered by leaving Cortana here, but he moves on regardless as the Flood crash a Pelican nearby. We fight through Flood and Covenant, over light bridges dealing with drones, through dark, depowered parts of High Charity, and up and down grav lifts. Master Chief gets shot like a fucking bullet into the Forerunner ship and promises to get Cortana back once Truth is dealt with. She knows that's not going to happen, so she shuts him down. The Arbiter and the Spec Ops commander survey the control room, all sealed up and seemingly impenetrable. The commander gives us a wraith, and we proceed through a canyon as the Loyal Covenant come out in force to stop us. We plan to get into the control room, and we see the commander's idea is to use a scarab, which we haven't seen since New Mombasa and is thus pretty sick. Inside, the Hunters declare their allegiance to the elites, which, if my Halo lore speculation subroutines are up to date, is likely a result of a previous Arbiter's role in bringing the Hunters into the fold. Checkmate, lore tubers. The Hunters provide a nice power boost as we charge onwards through brutes and jackals. We find some holding cell and are able to shoot the locks, letting out more elites and Hunters to join our little death stack. Outside, the brutes we have to fight provide enough distraction for Johnson to commandeer the Scarab, where, now that he's in the hot seat, he's able to negotiate. And this is one of those moments that I found just really satisfying, because both Sergeant Johnson and the Arbiter act like real people would. A weaker story wouldn't have bothered to provide a suitable framework for them to team up, but the work the writers have done up to this point to sell the Arbiter's character arc pays off in spades here. We hop in a Banshee and cover Johnson as he pilots the Scarab towards the control room. More ace combat action follows, navigating a winding ravine that is absolutely chocker with enemies. Ghosts, wraiths, and turrets lace the sky with plasma as we try to dodge and strafe all the enemies. This, admittedly, takes me some time. The Banshee is a bit weak to be in a protracted fight like this, and the multiple 2v1 dogfights you have to engage in don't help. But eventually, we've reached the end, and Johnson blasts open the doors, letting us get inside to face Tartarus. Tartarus has the Index and Miranda, so it seems that only humans can activate the Halos. He also has Guilty Spark, who once again is stopped from spoiling the plot, as Tartarus is far too concerned with the brutes being the ones to accompany the prophets on the Great Journey, and a boss fight follows. The Tartarus fight is a strange one. He has a shield that I think is unbreakable, so you're forced to evade him and his one-shot gravity hammer while you wait for Johnson to take it out with his beam rifle. The loop here is run in a circle, use active camo when necessary, wait for Johnson to hit Tartarus, and then, in the short damage window that follows, do as much damage as you can. Repeat a few times, and the Brute Chieftain is dead. Keyes is able to interrupt Delta Halo's activation, so while it still goes off, the blast is contained only to a small area. All looks good, but Guilty Spark then explains that the interruption has activated all of the Halos, and that the remote firing and destruction of the galaxy can only be initiated from one location. He doesn't get to say where though, as we cut back to the Master Chief, obviously upset at the loss of Cortana as his ship enters the solar system, where the UNSC and the Covenant are still engaged in fierce combat. The music swells. Admiral Hood asks the Master Chief what he's doing, and Chief replies with one of his classic one-liners. Ready to kill the Prophet of Truth, end this war and save the galaxy, and what the fuck do you mean it just ends? This is old news at this point. Halo 2's ending for many years ended up on most top 10 worst video game endings lists. From IGN to normal boots, this scene was vilified, and despite my contrarian leanings when it comes to Halo, I have to agree. This moment feels like the beginning of the climax, and instead, it's essentially just an advert for Halo 3. So, Halo 2 is over. The follow-up to a genre-defining title, how does it compare? Overall, I really enjoyed Halo 2. It's a lot closer to the 7th gen action-focused shooters that are my bread and butter, namely because it directly inspired most of them. The combat sandbox and action set pieces have gone from CE's observation, strategy, execute model to more of a holy fuck, there's hunters in this room style that, as I said earlier, really serves the power fantasy. You're constantly moving forwards, and while in Combat Evolved you'd often take an oblique angle so you could survey your enemy before engaging, in 2, it's often a straight shot to the most dangerous enemy with sound and fury. The action has really ramped up here, and that's reflected in the story too. Even when we get to Delta Halo, the writers avoid rehashing CE's mystery since we all know what the purpose of this station is, and I suppose if you cared enough you would have already looked up any extra lore sources you could find. Instead, we're on a singular mission to kill one guy and lay waste to whatever stands in our way. Irrespective of his sad boy routine right at the end, the Master Chief isn't a character, he's a constant. He is the action hero, and while his characterization suffers for it, it's all intentional. Plus, as with Combat Evolved, Cortana picks up a lot of his slack. Her characterization is stronger than in Halo 1, and this makes up for the Chief's silence. The real narrative meat here is found with the Arbiter, who we get to see go from Supreme Commander of a Covenant fleet to Heretic to Arbiter and finally Traitor as the game goes on. His arc really works in Halo 2. At the game's start, he's unjustly punished for his failure to protect Halo, given a shot at redemption by being the Arbiter, and then throughout the game he seeps further and further into distrust of the hierarchs. The Heretic leader plants a seed of doubt in his mind, but it's only when he's betrayed by the Prophets and Brutes that the Arbiter fights against them. Keith David does a phenomenal job as Thelfadam. He perfectly captures that noble rage and even the desperation towards the end of the story. He is a perfect match for Steve Downes' Master Chief. In my Halo 1 video, I mentioned that the storytelling from mission to mission was quite weak, a problem more than remedied here, but at a cost. All of Combat Evolved's story was in service to uncovering the mystery of Halo, and then preventing it from being activated, whereas in 2, the main goal nominally changes every few missions. Chief starts with the classic defend this station deal, and then we go to repel the Covenant invasion, then kill Regret, then get the Index, and finally intercept Truth as he heads to Earth. Similarly, the Arbiter starts with killing the Heretic leader, then he has to get the Index, and finally stop Tartarus from firing the ring. The narrative setups for each mission are far stronger here. All the information is already available to us and each level makes sense. No enemy communications we can't hear that give the plot its next direction, no Cortana analysis of the Covenant BattleNet or Halo systems. This does come at a cost though. Overall, the story does feel a bit rushed. Halo 2's development history is a wild ride, and due to problems with the game's engine and the aging hardware of the original Xbox in its twilight year, the entire project was essentially redone in 10 months. As good as the conveyance from mission to mission is, that benefit is often caused by sets of 2 or 3 missions leading directly into each other. The tutorial and subsequent battle on Cairo Station could easily be 1 mission, but in Halo 2 it counts as 3. This at times feels more like marketing. They could put 15 brand new missions on the back of the box, and while it wouldn't be a lie, it's not the most honest way of describing things. The absence of that trademark Halo mystery is felt. As I said earlier, this is an action game, designed to make you feel like an action hero. As much depth as is added to the Covenant via the Arbiter, there's little left to go around. The placement of the Arbiter missions breaks up the Chief story and does somewhat prevent it from feeling too rushed, but we have 2 Chief missions on Delta Halo, and the second ends with the Prophet's death. New narrative elements are frequently added at rapid pace. The story itself has some serious momentum, but most micro-stories are wrapped up a bit quick, especially as the game goes on. In the Arbiter's first mission set, there's plenty of variation, from active camo sneaking and fighting the rebels, to the Banshee section, and then the battle with the Flood, and the boss fight. The Chief's missions are similarly broken up with vehicle sections and close and long-range battles, but the mission objectives are often singular. The New Mombasa segment is a generic, let's go defend Earth, but that's interrupted by the Scarab, which, while teased through Outskirts and Metropolis, is defeated immediately after we see it in full. And that one walker's destruction is apparently enough for the Prophet of Regret to retreat to Delta Halo, where he is then killed. Arbiter's second mission set is concerned with getting the Index, and the micro-objectives are really just one boss fight against the Enforcer, followed by the vehicle runs and gondola rides. Once Arby and the Chief are set loose by the Gravemind, their objective is the same: retrieve the Index. In the second half of Chief's section, his objective nominally changes to stop Truth, but Truth already had the Index, so the actual objective remains the same. And despite the gameplay shakeup of the Arbiter section, being fighting with friendly elites and even hunters, then covering the Scarab from the air in the Banshee, his objective is the same. It's all a trade-off. I don't mean to paint the narrative structure as a mistake, and despite the game's rushed development, most of this feels intentional. The presence of developer crunch, though, is felt more in how quickly each mini-objective is wrapped up. And while any depth to the enemy of the first game is appreciated, a lot of it feels more conceptual than realized. At this point, a third game was all but guaranteed, and the devs would have known this going in, so I imagine much was left on the cutting room floor to be picked up by Halo 3, and sure, that's fine, but I'm looking at this game as a non-fan who never experienced Halo 2 at its peak, and I think overall the enjoyment of the campaign suffers for it. A video on Halo 2 would be incomplete without at least some mention of multiplayer. The social and competitive game modes Bungie designed, granted life by the all-new Xbox Live, were revolutionary for console gaming at the time. Halo 2 multiplayer enthralled everyone, from LAN nights with the boys to the highest strata of MLG pros. The Halo Championships series is still running today, and much of how online shooters were created after this was directly influenced by Halo 2. Today, you can experience a small glimpse of that peak thanks to the Master Chief Collection. But to be honest, I don't love Halo 2's multiplayer. If anything, it reminds me of reading Dragon Ball, JoJo's, and Fist of the North Star for the first time. There's a lot here that by today's standards is rather basic, in desperate need of iteration, and I have already played those iterations in this day and age. It's not a fault of Halo 2, but a lot of the things I take for granted in modern shooters simply aren't present here, and some tropes I dislike or have grown tired of got their start right here too. Halo 2's multiplayer had a seismic impact on gaming, but for me, it's more of an interesting museum piece to hop onto now and then, but it remains unable to hold me for long. So that's Halo 2. This was a harder video to get out. I had less to say on each mission, the voiceover tracks were all shorter, and coupled with more hours at work and playing a lot of Far Cry 2 and even Valorant, I kind of slumped on this one. Looking back, I still prefer Combat Evolved, but it's really a matter of degrees. Small or larger differences in gameplay loops, sandbox and story are stronger or weaker in each game, so it's not a massive difference. I imagine anyone remotely interested in Halo has already played this game, but if you haven't because it's old or whatever, the Master Chief Collection has a 1-to-1 remaster of the original game that looks real nice, and the updated cutscenes are fucking brilliant. Compared to Combat Evolved Anniversary, it is a night and day difference. I was planning to leave the end of the trilogy for later, but after helping my mates with achievement hunting in the various games late into the night, the Halo 3 bug has kind of taken hold of me. Despite some American messaging me to tell me I was a loser for getting one less kill than him in Halo 3 multiplayer. Never change Xbox Live. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.